sorry, I got a helmet with one of those pointy things on top. Thank you, Kyle. Switching away is a good thing.
So we are really focused on affordable housing in Orlando and Central Florida, and I think I could probably call it now our biggest and most crucial and most vexing issue. But we're committed to ensuring that every person, regardless of economic status, should have access to safe and affordable housing. Some of the units here will be held for those who have experienced homelessness, and a certain percentage is set aside for that, and we have committed as a community to permanent supportive housing.
I've been waiting for this for weeks. I gotta tell you, I am so ready to do this. I even have the bed ready. What? So when you get home, we can get really dirty.
Gotta go. Hey!
Here you go. With all this compost, we're gonna have the best plants in the neighborhood.
Good morning, Commissioners. We'll try that again. Still getting used to the technology. So I want to welcome everybody to the September 17th workshop of the Orlando City Council. And it's hard to believe that Greenworks Orlando is 10 years old already. And it was originally created through the hard work and input of a lot of community stakeholders. And at the 10-year mark, we decided to do the same thing and update it, but update it by engaging the community. So we have our 2018 Community Sustainability Action Plan that has new strategies and new best practices. I think I can already claim the designation of the greenest city in the Southeast United States. Occasionally Atlanta or Miami might try to suggest that they're trying to catch up, but we think we're out in front of them. Chris Castro, our Director of Sustainability, is going to share more on our plan and how we're going to continue to be the greenest city in the Southeast United States. Chris?
Well, good morning.
Start with where you just got back from.
Sure. Well, last night I just got back from the 2018 Global Climate Action Summit that was held out in San Francisco. Over 30 different country delegations came into San Francisco. Hundreds of different cities were represented, and this was the largest event since the Paris Climate Agreement, COP21. So it was the largest convening of multi-stakeholder groups around the world to really focus on how do we take the ambition that we have around climate action to the next level and really accelerate our progress so that we can reach our goals and ensure that the future of this planet for ourselves, for our kids, for our grandkids is healthy, cleaner, and more sustainable. Unbelievable experience. I actually have a couple of images that I'll show you towards the end of this presentation just to give you some examples of why I was out there and who I was able to meet while I was there. But I wanted to first thank you for your time, Mayor, commissioners, city staff, citizens who came out this morning to hear about our presentation. And I'm going to give a little update on Greenworks and then walk you through this new community sustainability action plan that we've been developing over the last year. Before I dive into the presentation, I really wanted to start by expressing my gratitude and appreciation for you all, specifically you all as elected officials of the city and leaders of the city of Orlando in making sustainability and resilience a key priority over the last decade. As Mayor Dyer mentioned, we are celebrating our 10-year anniversary of Greenworks Orlando, and we've made considerable progress, and I'm gonna touch on some of that. And as a result, we've made Orlando really a nationally recognized model for how cities could move towards becoming more sustainable, being greener, being healthier, improving public health, and the like. I'd also like to acknowledge the Greenworks team, city staff, and the VHB team who were instrumental in making this plan a reality. I'd like for those who helped out with this plan to please stand up and be recognized. And there are many others who weren't able to be here. They'll be here at 2 p.m. But this team here did everything from capturing data on our progress over the last decade to helping facilitate community engagement and workshops to developing the narrative and getting input from stakeholders. And truly, over the last 12 months, helped us to shape what we're going to present to you all today and what goes live today. I want to give you some quick background on the impact and the results that we've seen since we launched the first Greenworks Community Action Plan back in 2013. And some quick points and highlights so that you realize that this is not just about greenie weenie and just having this nice program siloed over here. This is about impact. We have, since launching this program, saved more than $1.6 million annually for city operations through the retrofitting of many of our facilities that were being led by our facilities engineering team, David Dunn, Ian LaHiff, and the team. And this includes fire stations, community centers, administration buildings, etc. We've facilitated more than 232 green buildings in the greater Orlando area, 15 of which are city-owned buildings that have achieved the high performance of LEED certification and above, including the Orlando Police Headquarters, our fire stations, the Permit and Records Building, and many more. Our city operations are now powered by more than 10% renewable electricity by installing rooftop solar, as well as participating and partnering with OUC to tap into their community solar farm in an effort to achieve our 100% goals. We've supported more than 6 farmers markets across the city and over 700 community garden plots in every neighborhood and every district throughout the city of Orlando. We've expanded more than 25 miles of sidewalks and 2 newly built multi-use urban trails extending 200 miles of on and off-street bike trails to provide safety for bicyclists and pedestrians. We've expanded 350 electric vehicle charging stations, making Orlando one of the top 5 EV-ready cities in the country when you look at the chargers per capita. We've planted over 20,000 trees, both in the right-of-way as well as on private property through the One Person, One Tree program. Enabled more than $500 million of clean energy capital for residents and businesses to make improvements to their buildings. We've also launched the Sunrail commuter train, expanded downtown limo and bus rapid transit, and the Juice Bike Share program through the collaboration of not just city staff, but our community partners. And these are some of the key initiatives that we've been able to. When it comes down to it, Greenworks has become an office that strives to implement the triple bottom line of sustainability: people, planet, and prosperity. We focus on ways to enhance quality of life that ensures cleaner air and cleaner water, that our streets are safer, and that are bikeable for our communities. We embrace social inclusion and become deliberate at addressing some of these social inequalities and inequities that are present throughout our communities, such as the lack of food access or housing affordability. We proactively protect the environment, being good stewards of our natural resources, creating new markets and job opportunities for the green economy, and helping our city prepare for, respond to, and recover from extreme weather events and a changing climate, all ensuring that we are more resilient as a community. These are some of the very, very important things that Greenworks has done and has worked with our community partners to ensure. So I'd like to walk you through this presentation about this update and some of the new strategies that you'll now witness in the Community Action Plan. I often start out when I present about Greenworks with this quote from Mayor Dyer: "Our vision of becoming the most environmentally friendly, socially inclusive, and economically vibrant city in the Southeast, one of the most sustainable cities in the US." This sets the tone, the vision of why sustainability and resilience, it holds a high priority for our city. So about a year ago, we brought together a number of task force members and communities, and we went through an entire year of hosting roundtables, workshops, public surveys, and I also want to make sure that we recognize the Greenworks task force members who were able to make it out today. If you can, please stand. These individuals were selected by Mayor Dyer to represent academia, private sector businesses, community groups, different government officials, different partner agencies like Orlando Utilities Commission and Lynx. It was a multi-stakeholder group that provided the guidance and the expertise behind developing this plan. Within the draft that is presented in front of you all and is able today to take home, we've done a number of things that we've changed, that we've modified compared to the first original plan. The first thing I want to mention is that we've updated how we measure our progress. Measuring progress is so important to realize whether or not you're moving the needle on sustainability. And one thing we realized was that there is a new international set of indicators for smart and sustainable communities, and it's the ISO 37120. This is 100 indicators that every city in the world, not just the United States, cities like Rio and London and Cairo and Barcelona, many others are now beginning to incorporate in their plans so that we can compare ourselves and our progress apples to apples. It's one thing for Mayor to say we claim to be the greenest city in the country or in the Southeast, which I agree. But I will say that now we can actually show the progress in some of the areas and identify areas that we may be lacking in so that we can put resources behind improving. We also identified, thanks to the task force and the community, 3 themes that you'll see woven throughout this plan. The first theme is social equity and ensuring that any program that we develop, we engage the community, and specifically those who are impacted, specifically those who are vulnerable, specifically those who are disproportional to socioeconomic statuses throughout our community, and ensuring that they have a spot at the table and that their community groups that are representing them are part of the decision-making process, and they were in this plan. Secondly is climate resilience. We need to realize that climate change is one of the greatest threats to humanity in the 21st century, but also one of the greatest opportunities that we have to improve our societies and our world. And so climate resilience and making us resilient to these potential impacts is woven throughout the plan. And lastly, it's around technology. How can we use smart city technologies to enhance and accelerate the goals that we've outlined throughout the Greenworks plan? Lastly, I want to mention that we, as the City of Orlando, are one of the first cities in the country to officially align with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. These global goals were defined and developed by over 195 countries around the world to determine what are the most important 17 efforts that we could all work on to eradicate poverty, to eradicate the inequalities in this world, and to protect ourselves from the threats to climate change and the environment. Those are the 3 objectives of the global goals for sustainable development. And we are one of the first cities in the country to take these global goals and officially align them with our local strategies and goals as well. And you'll see throughout the plan there's an appendix at the very end that actually shows the global goals and our goals and what strategies we're working on to officially tie with these using these new indicators that have been adopted by the UN as the sub-national government indicators to track progress. This is a big deal, a huge deal in fact. I mentioned quickly about our public outreach process. We held 3 mayor task force meetings to help us start compiling ideas from this group. We also held 6 multi-stakeholder roundtables with subject matter experts, and these were specific to each topic of GreenWorks: clean energy and green buildings and water and transportation. What we did was we brought together the leading community representatives from businesses to academia to individual community reps who came for those topics to develop the ideas that we brought forward, brainstorm what we can do to move the needle. We also held 2 community workshops, one in the Paramore community, one in Audubon Park. And those 2 were focused on engaging all of the community. Anyone who wasn't able to come to a roundtable or a task force meeting had the opportunity to come out, share their feedback and their input, and help us develop this plan for the community, by the community. And lastly, we realized that not everybody can make it out because of their busy schedules and their workloads, and so we decided to do 3 online surveys where we posted them up on Nextdoor and on Facebook and on Twitter and LinkedIn and various other outlets so that we can, of course, email blast, so that we can gather other responses from those who weren't able to make it. And we had over 1,000 responses for those online surveys. Hundreds of ideas were generated, and now this plan is the finalized strategies that we've identified to move forward. Before I dive into the strategies, I'm going to show you a quick video of some of these community engagements that we had over the course of this last year. We're helping to update the GreenWorks Orlando Community Sustainability Action Plan. This effort is identifying our goals, our targets, and our strategies that are working to make Orlando the most environmentally friendly, socially inclusive, and economically vibrant city in the nation. So hopefully that gives you a little taste of some of the engagements that we did, and it was truly fantastic to see the importance that sustainability holds for our community. This effort really is woven throughout almost everything that we do as a city. And that's the idea, is that sustainability and incorporating this as a priority is really a paradigm shift in thinking of how we operate our cities, how we make sure that our communities are healthy, and that we create vibrant economies, and of course that we protect the natural resources that our economy depends on. This is the triple bottom line and why it's so important. So I'm going to quickly run through some of these key strategies and just hit one in each area because we don't have too much time. One of the things that you'll see different in this plan is originally we had energy and green buildings as one topic. And what the community suggested is that we split those topics, clean energy and green buildings, into two separate focus areas because the strategies, although similar, are different enough for us to focus on. One is the demand side. How do we lower the demand and make our buildings more energy efficient and water efficient and lower the impact that the built environment has on the community. And the other is the supply side. How do we ensure that we're greening the supply of our electricity so that the buildings that are being powered are powered by clean and renewable energy sources that aren't polluting, that aren't impacting public health, that aren't impacting the environment, right? So these are two separate strategies. For the purpose of this presentation, I've put them together to keep it short, but I want to let you know that you'll see in the plan these two separated. So clean energy and green buildings. Why is this important? We have made a commitment to transition us to 100% renewable electricity. The way that we produce our electricity today is not sustainable. And we didn't realize that. These are unexpected consequences over investments that we've made decades ago. But we've inherited these investments. And now we need to realize that the transition to a clean energy economy is one of the greatest economic opportunities of this century. We're working on making Orlando a clean energy technology hub, and focused highly on retrofitting existing buildings and making new ones as green as possible. Before I dive into the strategies, I want to give you an overview of one of the things that we've been doing to help us achieve this 100% renewable electricity goal. We received a grant earlier this year from the US Department of Energy, federal government, who said, we're going to support Orlando in developing a technical roadmap to 100%. We're going to look at what the load is going to be in 2050 as we grow in population, as more electric vehicles come online. That means more electricity. What is the load then so that we can start to prepare? In addition, what is the potential capacity of solar? What is the potential amount of electricity we can produce with solar power? Can we produce all of our load for Orlando on our city property, or do we need to be dependent on other regions to power ourselves? And these are the types of questions that we're working on with the National Renewable Energy Lab. We're exploring rooftop PV, and one of the strategies you'll see in here is to expand more solar on city rooftops, on community centers, on fire stations, on other administration buildings, and even wastewater treatment plants. And these are areas that we can put solar where the load is so that we can minimize on the inefficiencies of providing power, and we can save the city money. At the end of the day, adding solar to these buildings saves us operational costs over 2.5 decades. And I'm happy to say that, as I mentioned earlier, we are currently being powered by 10% renewable energy for our municipal loads. The electricity that our buildings, all of the city buildings are consuming, are now powered 10% by renewables, by solar. And a big thanks to OUC for the ability for us to tap into their community solar farm. Now we offset all of City Hall, all 17 fire stations, and the Orlando Police Headquarters completely run off of solar for the entire year. It's a big move. So in terms of the strategies, you'll see that we've identified 8 different strategies in clean energy and green buildings. And one of the areas I wanted to highlight is the bolded strategy there of establishing a green building incentive program for new construction to encourage this type of high performance development. I mentioned I was in San Francisco this past week, and I was shocked at every single building, every other building was some type of Energy Star or LEED certified building. And what had shocked me wasn't that there was a bunch of green buildings, it was the fact that the business community was demanding it. If we want to attract the greatest tech companies and businesses to enhance Orlando's future, we need to provide the infrastructure that they're demanding, right? Amazon wants to make sure that every building that they occupy is 100% powered by solar and is in a LEED certified building minimum. They will not move to a city that doesn't have programs to enhance that, not just for them, but their employees that they're going to bring here. If we want to create a robust economy and make us a global competitor, we need to prioritize green building and clean energy. It's part of economic development. So we're working now with economic development to identify ways that we can incentivize businesses and developers to build green by providing tax rebates or other mechanisms to encourage them to go above and beyond the Florida Building Code. This is a voluntary program. It would not be a mandate at this point in time, but it would be something that can really provide some financial incentive to go above and beyond that code and build cleaner, greener, healthier buildings for the people who occupy them. Local food systems. Orlando is so well positioned to be an emerging leader in local food because of our mild climate and the consumer interest that we have around healthy, quality food. We have a pretty robust local growing and producing community here with organizations like Growing Orlando and Fleet Farming and many others who are local, developing farms on lawns, developing farms on underutilized lands. We are becoming well known around the country. In fact, one study shows that we're in the top 5 cities in the country for urban agriculture. We have things like urban chickens, thanks to the leadership of Commissioner Sheehan and all of you who helped push the ability for us to test these types of things. We started a new farmers market in Paramore, thanks to the leadership of Commissioner Hill. We're really starting to foster foodpreneurs. And so I really wanted to highlight that point of the Paramore Farmers Market. Earlier this year in January, we recognized that if we can provide access to healthy whole foods and make it a SNAP-eligible farmers market, we can start to engage families that need it most and provide them access to affordable and high-quality local food. So we're happy to have partnered with Orlando City, and soon we're going to be partnering with the Department of Health in Paramore to move the farmers market to a larger plot because of the interest that we had in the community and provide additional health services every Saturday morning moving forward. In addition, Fleet Farming, the well-known urban farming program that launched in Orlando and went viral across the world, is now moved a branch from Audubon Park, where they started, Commissioner Stewart's district, to now Paramore, where people are able to volunteer to get access to produce, where they're working with the ACE School and many other organizations, ONIC and others, to basically put urban gardens and community gardens at the site where people are living and where they're going to school. And we're able to now provide produce to Ebony Nutrition, who is taking that produce that's being grown by Fleet Farming and providing cooking and nutrition classes for those who need it most, and to give them access to ways to make something that's grown into a healthy meal that they'll demand moving forward. So in terms of local food strategies, we really looked at how do we really enhance what we've been doing, and one of them was to establish this comprehensive urban agricultural ordinance with zoning amendments. I've been working with planning, and one of the things we've identified is there isn't a single parcel within the city that is zoned agriculture, not one. We have to do pretty rigorous conditional use permit processes. We have to go through these amendments in order to allow for urban farming. And what we want to do is bring together all of these various urban agricultural programs, the urban chicken, the front yard farming, the various community gardens, and identify a map and an ordinance that brings it all together and helps signal to these growers that these are the areas where you can do certain types of farming. We don't want warehouse farming in the middle of a neighborhood, right? But we want to encourage community gardens and small urban plots. We may want a warehouse farm in a commercial district, but we don't necessarily know that at this point in time. So the idea is developing an overall code change where we can identify where people can grow what types of food and the intensities of agriculture. Livability is also another important topic of ours and something we've made considerable progress in. And livability is one of these catchment terms that often is hard to define. But really, when it comes down to it, livability is the sum of all of the factors that contribute to a higher quality of life. That's what livability is about. It's about the built environment, the natural environment coming together, making sure that we have green spaces and parks that are available because it's important for our quality of life and our health and well-being. It's about urban forestry and ecological corridors and making sure that we have a healthy tree canopy. It's about economic prosperity and trying to boost up areas within our communities that may not have the same opportunities as others. It's about social stability and equity. These are all part of livability. I want to highlight one of the strategies we're working on now, and that is to become a certified wildlife habitat city. And part of that is to try to harmonize the built environment with the natural world. Pollinators are such an important part of producing food and helping us have a healthy quality of life. And so we're working now with the National Wildlife Federation to go through a series of checklists and strategies, everything from changing our ways in which we maintain our parks so they're not using heavy pesticides and neonicotinoids, all the way to enhancing pollination and local native plants at our community centers and throughout our neighborhoods. These are critical areas, and part of that initiative, of course, is the Migrating Mural Project that we worked on with the Nature Conservancy, raising awareness through art so that we can get people connected. One thing I learned in San Francisco that stuck with me, somebody mentioned that art is the way to tug on somebody's heartstrings so that their mind opens up, right? We can't convince somebody to completely change their mind without hitting their heart. And art and culture and music are ways in which we can tug at somebody's heartstrings so that their mind opens up, and at that point can be enlightened as to how to create a sustainable lifestyle. So the livability strategies, there are many in here, but I want to mention one that we're working on right now with parks and many others, parks and planning, code enforcement, and many others, and that is to amend our LDC and our internal code to strengthen the protections for our trees, for our wetlands, and for our natural lands. These natural resources can never regrow again, other than trees. If we continue to build upon our wetlands, we will never have them anymore. That's the point. They are such an important part of our quality of life. They provide so many ecosystem benefits, from preventing flooding for these extreme weather events that are coming, to providing wildlife corridors, which are so important, to many others, cleaning our water, most importantly. Many of our wetlands act as a filter that go into the Wekiva River Basin, that go into literally our aquifer that we get our water from. And if we continue to destroy these natural lands and these wetlands, we'll never have them again. And so that's why it's important that we strengthen these protections. And I promise you we are working towards that, and we're going to bring that forward to you all. Transportation. This is probably one of the greatest challenges, but also opportunities that we have within the Greenworks plan. And it's not news to you all that transportation is highly valued within our community to figure out how we use multimodal, mixed-use forms of transportation that enhance complete streets and allow people to not just use a single automobile to get to and from their work or their play or their learning. So we want to start working on ways to further enhance our pedestrian access, our transit, ensure alternative fuels, and of course, multimodal mobility. So one highlight is that we've made considerable progress thanks to Fleet and Facilities with our EV readiness in the city of Orlando. I mentioned that we're in the top 5 EV, electric vehicle readiness for the country in terms of cities, in terms of how many chargers we have per person. And this is important because without the infrastructure, nobody's going to buy an electric car if I feel like I'm going to run out of the electricity every single day. So we need to have this network at public parks, at our city parking garages, on-street parking, in our businesses. This is critically important. We've expanded considerable amount of EVs. We have about 80 electric vehicles in the city's fleet, which is tremendous. We had 1 when we passed the Greenworks plan in 2013. We have 80 now, and we're in the process of purchasing another 20 coming this year. We'll have 100 by the end of this next fiscal year. Everything from Chevy Bolts and Nissan Leafs to electric motorcycles for the Orlando Police Department so that they can use them for special events and races and rallies. This is so critically important, and we're looking to continue to deploy even more of those. I want to highlight the fact that we're committed to expanding more electric vehicle charging. We're working now with the state of Florida on the Volkswagen settlement funding, and we're looking at finding ways to get some assistance in deploying some of these EVs in partnership with Lynx and OUC and others. But I also want to highlight and underscore the partnership we've had with Lynx over the course of this last 2 years specifically. And that is, through the leadership of Ed Johnson, we've been able to make a commitment that we are going to move the downtown limo to an all-electric, zero-emission bus system by the year of 2025. The goal is, over the course of the next 7 years, that we work incrementally to change every bus that operates on the limo, which is about 16 buses right now. Not a lot of buses, 16 buses, and move them to a fully all-electric bus. It may be a bus, it may be a shuttle. We're actually looking at various different types, and we've tested, as many of you know, we've tested different types of electric buses. But the point is that we need to ensure, from a quality of life standpoint, that we are not polluting local air quality here in downtown, because these buildings act as kind of a hub that these emissions stagnate in, right? Just like a valley in LA or in Salt Lake City, where the pollution basically just gets hugged inside of this valley. Well, downtowns do that exact same thing for air pollution. And so figuring out ways to make some of the biggest polluters move to electric is a big deal. Solid waste. I often say that we are the only species on the planet that produces non-biodegradable waste. Think about that. Millions of other species we share this planet with. We're the only one that's not part of a closed-loop system. It's not part of a cycle. And so our goal has, even back in 2013, has to move towards becoming a zero-waste community. That means almost all of the produce, of the waste that we generate goes back into the economic system somehow. Recycled, repurposed, composted, diverted through an anaerobic digester, all types of strategies, including the electronic waste. We're in an electronic world. We need to make sure that as we move forward, we find strategies to recycle our electronic waste. One of the ways that we've been able to position Orlando to be a leader in this space is last year in October, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce selected Orlando as the pilot city for what's called Beyond 34. And the idea is that the U.S. for 20 years has been stuck at a 34% diversion rate for the waste that we dispose. Only 34% is being recycled, and we can't get above or beyond 34. So the idea is they wanted to choose a city in a region for them to work on a sustainable waste management plan, looking at composting facilities and new MRFs with the county and anaerobic digesters and communication that's standardized, different strategies, and we've been working with Disney and Walgreens Boots Alliance and Tupperware and the Chamber of Commerce and the Orlando Economic Partnership and many, many, many others to figure out how to actually do this as a community and as a region. So in terms of our strategies, one of the things that you'll see coming up later this fall is moving forward with a policy to require that commercial and multifamily buildings have an option to recycle. This has been something that we've been hearing from the community as a high priority. We have so many people, I can't tell you how many emails and how many Facebook messages I get about people saying, hey, I live in this apartment complex and it frustrates me that I can't even go out and drop my recyclables out. It frustrates me. Or, hey, I work in this office building and every single week I'm the one who takes home the recycling back to my house so that I can officially throw it away and dispose of it properly. Literally, people are putting waste in their cars and driving it home so that they can do the right thing. We at least need to require that there is an option, whether it's a cart, whether it's a dumpster, whether it's a porter service. There are many ways to do this, but we need an option. We need to have an option. And that's what we're looking to bring forward as a requirement to you all later this fall, and we'll have a lot more information about that shortly. And last but certainly not least, water resources. Water is the lifeblood of every living thing on the planet, including ourselves. And if we don't protect our water, we are certainly not going to be sustainable or certainly not be a thriving city in the 21st century. Orlando is home to over 100 different lakes, and 10% of our square footage is actually water. My good friend Clayton Ferrara often says, we're in Atlantis in reverse, right? And literally, we were developed essentially around water bodies. Florida came out of the ocean because of many different ways, but I will mention that the biggest use of water in the city is irrigation. 50 to 60% of the potable water that's coming from the aquifer does not get drinking, goes onto our lawns. And when we put fertilizers onto our lawns and it rains every single day, guess what happens? Flows right into the stormwater system. That stormwater system goes right into these little retention ponds. Some of those are connected to our waterways. And then you look around the state and you look at Lake Okeechobee, a lot of that is coming from Central Florida as well, believe it or not. Believe it or not, we are also part of this problem, and we need to have a higher standard for water quality. And that's a big thing that we've been working on. And I'll tell you, Streets and Stormwater has done a tremendous job at improving some of the impaired water bodies, and we're going to continue to work towards that goal. Last year, we partnered actually with an organization called Barrels by the Bay, Coca-Cola and Disney. And the idea was that Coca-Cola has a bottling factory here, and they had these syrup containers that essentially they were obviously making Coca-Cola out of. But afterwards, they didn't know what to do with these large containers. So they approached Barrels by the Bay and they said, hey, do you think you can connect cities with our program and turn these syrup containers into rain barrels? We'll give them free of charge. We'll have the community paint them at the Home and Garden Show at Epcot. And then we can place them in public schools, and we can place them in parks and community centers so that we can start to capture rainwater and minimize the amount of irrigation that we're using to water our lawns, right? So this has been tremendous. We worked with 72, we deployed about 70 different rain barrels throughout the community, and we're also working on capturing those again for this coming year, and we're going to continue hosting a rain barrel program. Just like the composters will now soon have a rain barrel program for residents to get access to free rain barrels. They can put them in their gutter systems. They can minimize the amount of irrigation that goes into the lawns. So I wanted to underscore this one strategy because I was actually surprised that it came in at one of the highest voting strategies in the entire plan, and that was to adopt a stronger protections for the use of fertilizers, herbicides, and pesticides because of the impact that they have on our waters. This is not an easy thing to do, and it's something that's going to take a significant amount of stakeholder engagement. But Seminole County and Orange County have actually adopted even stricter standards than we have, and we're committed to moving that in the right direction. We are committed to figuring out how we solve for this eutrophication and this algae bloom problem that we have, a lot of it being fertilizing our lawns that we water and gets rained off and washed off into the waters. We got to figure that out. So in closing, I wanted to just show you a couple of different shots from this Global Climate Action Summit, and I'll tell you, it's probably the most meaningful and impactful summit I've been to since the Rio Plus 20 Summit in 2012. And the energy and the momentum that our planet has right now to solve this problem is unprecedented. We are at a very important time in our history where cities are beginning to prioritize acting on climate and moving towards sustainability in almost everything that they're doing. Mayor Garcetti in LA, Governor Brown from California, many others across the country, even the U.S. Conference of Mayors had the delegates represented here at this summit. I was able to present at 4 different side events because I was recognized as one of 22 climate trailblazers in the world, one of 6 in the United States, one of 22 in the world, and the only one representing local government. I was the local government rep at this summit. And what they had me do is go to various side events and interviews and presentations to showcase what we, as the City of Orlando, are doing to address this issue. And I was representing all of us, you as our council, our constituents, our businesses, all of the amazing work that's happening throughout the City of Orlando. I was also able to connect with some of the leading trailblazers themselves, everyone from Jane Goodall to Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, to Amory Lovins, who in my opinion is like the Einstein of the 21st century, to Tom Steyer, who has invested in Orlando in the past, and many, many, many others who were so impressed at what Orlando has been doing, specifically over the last 5 years, to elevate our priority and elevate the way we communicate our work to the world. They feel that Orlando, because of our international presence, is the city that could be a model for the world. And if we hold this as a high priority, I guarantee you, we're going to be put not just on the map for entertainment and theme parks, but we're going to be put on the map as one of the most sustainable cities in the world. And that's our goal. So with that, thank you so much for your time and walking me through this. We are very excited. I want to thank everyone who participated in developing this plan, and I look forward to engaging moving forward. Thanks.
Great update, Chris. So it's an important management strategy to find people that are passionate about the subject matter that they're working on and smart, and then just let them loose to do their thing. So that's Chris Castro and sustainability.
Thank you, Mayor Dyer.
Okay, I'm learning how to use this cue thing. Commissioner Sheehan and then Commissioner Hill.
Well, thank you, Mayor Dyer, and District 4 residents and I have been really engaged in this process. And of course, saving Constitution Green, that green space was incredibly important to my district and the city as a whole.
Yes.
The community gardens that started in Festival Park, Colonial Town, Reeves Terrace is the first one for underprivileged, for people that needed it more, that in public housing, and then Broadway United Methodist Church in Lake Eola Heights. They're doing wonderful. I think it's one of the largest community gardens that we have. The Pink Ribbon Garden for breast cancer survivors is in District 4 in Lake Druid Park. Worked with Melissa Etheridge on that and her foundation. Front yard gardening with the planning department, because again, people were getting code enforcement violations for gardening in the front yards. and we made it, worked with planning to make sure that, you know, they looked good and the people could still grow food in their front yard.
Precisely.
Urban chickens, reducing your carbon footprint, part of the slow food movement. Urban bike trails. I worked on the Orlando Urban Trail when everybody thought that was completely insane. And now we've got a bike network trying to get them to connect throughout the city. I know we've got a lot of missing links, something else that we're working on today. And then composting in cisterns. The Mills 50 Main Street District was doing that about 7 or 8 years ago, and everybody thought we were crazy. We were getting truckloads of cisterns and composters and sold out every single time because this is something that people really needed and wanted. I'm glad to see that we finally have a city program to do that. And again, I think it's so important to also to show that these things happened in partnership with planning, economic development, transportation engineering, solid waste facilities, and for the community gardens, the Mayor's Neighborhood Matching Grant. So again, a lot of different, you know, you have a lot of stakeholders and partners in this, in City Hall, and I want to thank them as well. And I had a couple questions on the next step. With commercial recycling, I know we're working in neighborhoods with educating people about contaminated loads, because that's been a problem. People are throwing styrofoam and plastic, and they're putting their recycling in a plastic bag and then throwing that in the recycle bin, and that's creating a problem for recycling because it jams the equipment. And people are throwing things they shouldn't be throwing in. They're throwing garbage in, that's contaminating loads. So I'm glad to see Solid Waste doing that education project. That's been part of the reason why commercial recycling hasn't worked. We've done pilot programs with different apartment complexes, but I think part of that education is so critically important, and people aren't getting it. And I know Solid Waste is out doing that, but if we have a dedicated place for people in commercial facilities to recycle, I think they will. But
Likewise.
But you can't just be, it has to be where they physically take it somewhere.
Right.
Because that's been the problem we have with the contaminated loads. If you make it too easy, people throw trash in it.
Yep. Well, and on that real quick, Commissioner, you know, one of the initiatives that Solid Waste launched earlier this year is ORL Collects. And it's essentially a web and mobile app now that any resident can download and look at whether or not the thing that they're going to throw away is recyclable or not. And that's part of the education gap that we have, is that people are doing what they call wish cycling, where they wish that everything could be recycled, and technically it could, but there's no commodity market for it, right? And so the MRF is only selecting a certain number of recyclables, 1 through 5 and 7 for our current MRF here. And so it is a process of education. We are also working with Recycle Across America. Mayor is now one of the leading officials who's promoting this around the country. And Recycle Across America has created a standardized recycling label so that the airport, the public school system, our parks, our businesses are all using the exact same communication materials on how to recycle. That's part of the problem, is that we have over 7 million different labels in the country. And so people are confused about, can it be recycled here, or maybe at the airport, maybe at the school system? Now we're standardizing that, and the airport, the school system, and the city is committed, as well as the City of Winter Park and other regional partners are now using this standardized recycling label to hopefully stop the contamination.
Is there a way to do a PSA on this plastic bag thing? Because I know it's a problem. Even when we did the recycling thing with the businesses in Mills 50, there are a lot of people saying, well, it's really hard for us not to put it in bags. So I think that that's really a problem.
Yes.
So is there a way for us to do and make it funny? I mean, kind of like the
almost
thing
like the composter video that we did.
Yeah, I mean, if people react to stuff that's funny and
Sure.
you know, it's not too preachy, I think that would be helpful, because apparently this throwing recycling in plastic bags and then putting in the recycle bin is a larger problem than I was even aware of.
I like the PSA idea, and it gives me an opportunity here just to thank the communications team, the entire team with Michelle Brennan, April Michael, Janet, Trinity. These individuals, we wouldn't be here today without them. There's no doubt about it. They help us to communicate our mission and our message to the community so that it becomes part of the culture of Orlando. And we've been doing a tremendous job. When I show people our resources, they're like, what firm did you use to put these things together? And I said, it's all in-house. We have the best communications team probably in the country, one of them, and there's no doubt that we're going to continue working with them. I love the idea of the PSA.
Well, they did Angry Birds on Only Rain Down the Drain. I think that was very successful, because it was funny, and I think people really got it. On solar, is it better? I know I saw a lot of the rooftop arrays that you had there. Is it better for them to be on flat or angled roofs, or does it matter? for the solar?
Well, ideally, you want to have an angled roof, and that's part of the solar-ready design. One thing I forgot to mention is now we've agreed that every new building is going to be solar-ready. If we can't put solar out the get-go, we're going to provide the conduit to the roof, we're going to provide the inverter pad to put the inverters, we're going to make sure that the bus bar in the breaker box allows for additional capacity, and ideally have a tilted roof that's upwards of 20 to 25 degree tilt. The best way to put solar is on a roof that is tilted at that angle because you provide perfect perpendicular power, sunlight to the panel. And you want to basically be at a the panel perpendicular to the sunlight. Because we're about 23.5 degrees above the equator, you want to be in that 20 to 25 degree tilt so that you can almost be directly to the sunlight. That's how you maximize solar production. So ideally, it is something that you have a tilted roof. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't add solar to flat roofs. We just did the records and permit building, and they now have standardized racking to essentially provide that tilt so that you can maximize the solar electricity. And many of them without even penetrating the roof. You can do what's called ballasted systems, where you essentially hold down the racking system with heavier cinder blocks, and it basically approves the wind load requirements for these systems.
You mentioned the limo buses, and are you going to put a solar array on the limo station so that if you're going to go to the electric buses, that you'll be able to capture at the facility and put it to the buses?
That's part of the assessment that we're going to be doing. I know that Ed Johnson at the LIGS team is looking at adding solar to the operational center that they have off of, I think it may be LB or somewhere out there in the District 5 area. But we are looking to add solar so that these buses can be powered by as clean energy as possible.
Okay, and I had one more comment. There's a transition team for Mayor Demings, and a lot of these issues are things that we've been working on a long time and he might not be aware of. And Jim Pugh sends his love. He says he's on that transition team, so this might be an opportunity to communicate some of these long-term needs in terms of things we need to do in partnership with the county.
Most definitely.
I think that would be good to go ahead, and this is an opportunity for us to move forward on some things.
Most definitely. We had a sustainability forum with the candidates before elect Mayor Deming was selected, and he was so interested in heightening sustainability as one of his key pillars, the way that Mayor Dyer did, and of course the synergy between the mayor and the county is going to continue to enhance, and we're very excited about the opportunities to collaborate on these things, share resources, and expand the impact. Great point.
Okay, Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, as always, a phenomenal job. I echo Mayor Dyer's sentiments about the passion. I mean, you live, eat, and sleep this, and I like to thank your team, ideas, and also the community stakeholders and staff. As you stated, this is truly a collaborative effort, and I knew absolutely nothing about sustainability. Before I came here, I knew about wanting to protect the earth and caring about the environment, but the deep dives that I think you give each and every one of us, and allowing us to be a part of the process of what's going on in our district and with our constituents. I'm just elated to work side by side and glean and learn from you, because I know many here know, but maybe those that are at home don't know the jewel that we have in Chris Castro, a leading voice throughout the world, a young leading voice throughout the world. And we're so proud to have you, and that you're going out and representing us. We haven't done quite as much, but we've done quite a lot in District 5, as Commissioner has in 4, but we're up and coming. I think we have about 6 community gardens since we started. We have an urban incubator to where we grow foods and then disseminate it out into restaurants and to our seniors' homes. We have front yard grows, but I think in Paramore we decided to do backyard grows. You have to understand your demographics and kind of tailor-make some of these initiatives. And that has really been coming along to where I think we're getting ready to expand out to District 6, if I'm not confused. The other thing is the farmers market. It's we're raising entrepreneurs over there.
Yes, we are.
We are distributing health and wellness and healthy foods, but we're creating young and old entrepreneurs to become business owners eventually. And I really appreciate your in leadership in that, in creating job opportunities there. So
Correct.
it has been a great success now that we're expanding over with that collaboration with the health department, with Dr.
Sharon.
Yes, indeed, Dr. Sharon, a good friend. I'd like to talk about the technical program that we're working on. That is, I know we didn't mention it there in the impact.
It's in the plan, though.
It's in the plan. It is
Yes.
in the plan, and it really does affect those from certain areas that might need skill sets and high-wage jobs. Can you kind of elaborate on that we're working on?
Yeah, so Commissioner Hill earlier this year brought me in and talked about a potential workforce development program similar to the Greenprint program when we were building the venues, where we had a minimum percentage of those in low and moderate income communities getting some mechanical engineering, plumbing type jobs, right, MEP jobs for the venues. And the thought was, how can we create a Greenprint program where we essentially harness the same type of idea, but train individuals at the University of Central Florida and Valencia College, as well as the Florida Solar Energy Center, in trades such as building efficiency and benchmarking and solar installations and many, many other green jobs, installing EV charging stations, you name it, and then help connect them to jobs in the local community here to give them opportunities and getting into the green economy. This is something we're really excited about. We've brought together a good group of individuals that represent 15 Light Years Foundation, that represent Ideas for Us. And we're starting to get more and more members of the community involved in planning out what this looks like. OUC is very interested as well in supporting this effort. So it's something that over the coming years, we're looking to bring forward and hopefully develop.
And thank you, Mayor Dyer, for your support in those efforts. Can you tell me a little bit about, I thought that was pretty cool, this wildlife habitat?
Yes. Yeah, so the Wildlife Habitat Certification is essentially the National Wildlife Federation has created a certification for cities. And essentially they have minimum criteria in terms of how many of your homes are certified wildlife habitats. We were impressed that in Orlando there's over 240 households who have literally gone through the process voluntarily by themselves, all over, and I think every single commission district, and they have certified their homes to ensure that there's no pesticides, there's no herbicides, that they're planting native wildflowers so that they can attract pollinators and other forms of birds. They're putting, little areas where birds can come and do bird baths. Sorry, that was an easy one. Messed up on that one.
That's too low tech for you.
At the end of the day, the point is that we want to enhance how we harmonize with the natural world by planting native wildlife, by planting native species, and really enhancing our connection to nature. And so we're close in the process. I think we're close to about 70% of the way there. And we're going to work with parks on a couple of other tweaks that we need to make. Some of those include using all-electric landscape equipment that is not polluting and quieter. And so at Lake Eola now, the Parks Department has purchased these electric weed blowers, the trimmers, and many others that are now moving us towards an all-electric, zero-emission maintenance for our lands and our parks, which I think is a huge step forward.
And last but not least, well, I have one more thing, but the Lake Larned Dune Community Garden, is Greenworks going to participate and help spearhead that?
100%. You can rely on myself and my team. I'll say that the core team in Greenworks, what's interesting is the way that we've structured Greenworks is very unique around the country. We are essentially a sustainability firm in the city, in the executive offices of the city that's helping every city department and division incorporate sustainability. And of course, I have a core team: Ian Jurgensen, Brittany Sellers, Joe England. These are the core team that fall under the Greenworks office. But the interesting thing is I've reached out to various other departments and divisions to bring other representatives from other departments to my weekly meetings and part of the Greenworks team. We now have upwards of 15 individuals throughout the city who are leading the charge in every single aspect, and we look forward to continuing to expand that office and that team so that we truly embed sustainability in everything that we do.
And now, last but not least, I just want to make a brief comment that I really appreciate, through your leadership, Mayor and Council and staff, that you have really been engaged. I know in District 5 and in District 6, Commissioner Eads can speak on that, but making sure that our constituents are informed, that they're also engaged, and you are making sure that they are participants. You're not just coming giving them information and leaving. You're making sure that they're a part of the renewal energy and sustainability, whether it's inside of their homes, whether it's at the gardens, but more so just you're there, you're showing up, you're not sending surrogates. And that's very important, because as we move the city forward, the people do need to know where their resources lies, and that we communicate. And I must say that the Greenworks Department has made sure that there is social inclusion, that there is environmental inclusion, and they're so responsive. And I think we're more aware and more informed, because as I said, I knew absolutely zero. Many of us did not know about environmental justice and inclusion and sustainability and all those things. And hopefully you've seen anytime that Greenworks come out, the room is packed.
And people love it. And you're right. We couldn't do that without each and every one of you all helping us get into the communities and meet with the neighborhood associations and continue to invite us out. Whether it's myself or my team, we will be out there to continue to educate and engage those individuals in our process. And that's core. We're not perfect, I'll let you know, but we are certainly eons ahead of where we were 5 years ago, and we're now being deliberate at making sure that social inclusion and equity is part of our process and our plan. We've been working very closely with Organize Now and Organize Florida to mobilize their membership. They were not only part of the task force, they were part of the roundtables and the community forums and the surveys. They even got to help edit our plan and make sure that some of the diction and strategies that were included did truly embrace the concept of social equity. And it's not perfect, and it's certainly we can do a lot better. But with their help and with others in the community, we will continue to elevate that message and ensure that everyone has a seat at the table and everyone is a part of the decision-making process when we go to implement these strategies. I want to underscore that just by accepting this plan does not mean that every strategy in this plan is approved. You all well know that, but I want the community to know that as well. Every strategy is going to need stakeholder engagement. We're going to need to bring forward a formal process, whether it's a resolution or an ordinance. We're going to have to do the various reads. This is not saying, yeah, we're approving everything moving forward. This is helping to accept that this is our next roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years to help us achieve the 2040 goals, right? Incremental progress. As I often say, sustainability is a journey, not a destination. We'll never get to a point where we are 100% sustainable because it's always moving. There will always be community problems. This is a journey. And luckily we have you all as leaders who are trying to make sure that we're a part of this journey and that Orlando continues to be a leader in this space.
Thank you, Chris.
Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you, Mayor. Chris, thank you for your work. All of us could sit up here and talk about the things that are happening in each of our districts, and I won't go through a lot of the details, but I'm really proud of them in there. Yeah, I'm proud of Audubon Park and the work that they've done, and they're as a green initiative community means a lot. And then seeing them work with our first really commercial composter over at East End.
Yep.
Has really been a great experiment for us and a great pilot program.
It has.
A couple of things I want to just kind of touch on. One of the things that we talked about Commission many months ago, was the idea of a compassionate cities movement. When you lay the sustainability goals against compassionate city movement, they are almost identical.
I see, yeah.
Because what happens is when you begin to start looking at your community as a compassionate community, you have to look at things like poverty and sustainability,
Yes.
what you do across the board, because what it means is not only just compassion to your next door neighbor, but it means compassion to the entire community.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm proud that this council took advantage of that, and this, I think, is a good example of how we continue down that road.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a couple of quick questions I want to
Yes,
ask
sir.
you about. So the issue about commercial recycling, I've been on that for a long, long time.
Yes.
And the idea of having us move to a point where we are looking at that as mandatory versus voluntary really starts with the fact that we have a lot of our commercial facilities that are ill-equipped to move forward. And
Yes,
it
we
would
do
be
realize
unfair to
that.
go to them and say it's now mandatory without having us provide that lead time. I think we've done a good lead time on the building, the green building program
Yes.
you've got.
Yep.
Explain a little bit about how we can use that as an example to move forward.
Yes.
Because
Great point, Commissioner.
like I say, the volunteer movement, and then sometime in the future, it needs to be mandatory because it's important for us to do.
Well, I want to highlight and underscore two things that will be brought forward with this ordinance. One is that we're going to require that all new construction provides enough space for a recycling container, just like we require enough space for a trash container, right? Currently, as you mentioned, many of the businesses that have been developed, we didn't have a requirement for you to have space to put a recycling container. And so that's really important. The first change is making sure that in the LDC, we require that any new building now requires recycling. Secondly, we're going to go back to the existing buildings over a 4-year period. We're going to start for the first 6 months with new construction. Then we're going to phase into the largest buildings, everything that's, I believe, 250,000 square feet and above. And little by little, we're going to ratchet in everyone else. We're going to phase in all of the other businesses. And that's going to come with robust education. We're going to be doing community forums to make sure that the businesses in main streets are all educated and on ways that they can share recycling dumpsters along Main Streets, just like in Audubon Park. You have several of those Main Street strips that can all share recycling. And we are going to work very closely with Solid Waste to ensure that this is a seamless rollout. There are ways for businesses to be exempt in doing this, and we're going to make sure that we're sensitive to some of the inherent challenges that businesses might have. But there are also good solutions out there, even without space for a dumpster. As I mentioned, you can just have your carts, like residential carts, and you can have a line of them, 4 and 5 carts. As long as you're providing the option for somebody to dispose it correctly, you're going to be approved, right? Same thing as when we tested in multifamily, we tested a porter service where there was a service that the business hired that would come to each door and collect the recyclables out of the little bins, right? And that is another potential solution where you don't even need a bin on site. They'll take all that recyclables off site and they'll properly recycle it. And the beauty is that recycling is cheaper than throwing everything away in the trash can. It's literally cheaper. It's half the cost when you look at a yard. So it's the size of a dumpster. It's $7 per dumpster per yard in a regular trash dumper. It's $3.50. It's literally half. So if you properly divert your waste, the business can actually save money. And we have case studies that Mike Carroll and the team have done to show that by moving towards recycling, you will save your business money, and you can use that excess money to potentially hire the porter service or whatever it might be. So it is something we're sensitive about. We'll continue to do community engagement, but we feel is the right move to make based on the stakeholders' input.
Let me cover a couple of the quick things,
Sure.
and I won't go long, I promise.
Sure.
I love the idea from Commissioner Sheen about doing some promotional stuff, but one of the challenges that we have is that Orlando accepts recycling at a different type than Orange County, and I think different numbers than even Seminole County. How do we work towards a standard in such a way? Because if we end up doing some kind of promotional and we don't take plastic bags as an example by the nature of what happened, but Seminole County does, the PSA needs to be kind of much like the one we do with the rain, where it's been supported by a whole
many
host
others
of people. Right.
in the region. Sure.
Exactly. So you end up
Sure.
having this standardizing portion of it. How do we get to that standard for the community?
The types of recyclables that we can collect is based on the recycling MRF, or the materials recovery facility, and the infrastructure of that MRF, right? Our MRF is a little bit outdated. And there are many newer MRFs in the region that are much more sophisticated. They have bag cutters before it goes through the convention. So even if you do put it in a plastic bag, they cut the bag and they strip the bag out. A lot of these processes have been solved because of the inherent challenges that are being faced around the world. And so part of Beyond 34 that I mentioned is we are closely working with the county and other investors to identify how we could upgrade or potentially rebuild a brand new, much more sophisticated MRF for the region. And that means all of Orange County, even surrounding other counties and municipalities who all currently go to the Orange County MRF, can now have a better experience and can potentially collect even more of our recyclables. As I mentioned, we collect 1 through 5 and 7. We miss out on 6 because of the lack of infrastructure that we have at that MRF and the commodities market. We hope and we do feel that by collaborating with Orange County and bringing up a new MRF over the coming years, that we could truly help us reach our zero waste goals and rid the confusion, as you're mentioning, that we have in the region.
And you mentioned about the fertilizer legislation against, I guess, phosphate-based fertilizers is what you're trying to go through.
Correct.
Where are we in that process? And frankly, wouldn't it be better if Orange County had that countywide as a charter and let us support that? I mean, I'm just trying to think in terms of enforcement or legislation.
Sure. Well, the county has approved a recycling or a fertilizer ordinance that's a little bit more strict than ours. And in fact, I've sat down with Lisa Henry about this to do a comparison, not just with Orange County, but with other surrounding municipalities and counties to really see where we are. I want to underscore that we are not doing a bad job. We do have restrictions on phosphate in certain parts of the year. We do have restrictions on irrigation. I think by doing this assessment, we'll identify those gaps and be able to target them. And that's what we would hope to bring forward to
I know when we did the recycling metals several years ago, there was a lot of inconsistency between ours and the county. We came out first, we moved faster.
Yes.
They came out, had a little bit more restriction. And so you end up having some recyclings in the county, some in the city,
Sure.
And they weren't all consistent. So, I mean, I see the same thing happening in the fertilizer side.
Yep.
And I want to make sure that we're consistent from that standpoint because it's
I
important
agree.
to us. And then the last thing is the idea, which you and I have talked about and I've shared with some of our staff, the idea that when somebody comes in and wants to do green parts of their home, they want to require, I guess, do more in terms of green. Somewhere along the line, it seems that we may want to either streamline permitting, may want to move permitting to a different core of people that have a specialty in solar or in wind power or whatever else it may be. The intent being that we want to figure out a way to encourage that as opposed to discourage that. It seems to me today that we're almost in a case where we discourage it because it is so new to data. So one of the things that I'm interested in making sure that we do is as we move forward, we have a core of people that will allow that to be streamlined, move forward, additional, maybe even benefits to have an additional insulation in your home.
Sure.
Something that says that we're going to make the future be different for us because
More efficient.
You're taking less load off of our system. We want to make sure that we encourage that early on and not have to kind of force people down that path.
Well, and one of the things I'll mention, we've been working with economic development, specifically Brooke and Lillian, to figure out ways to streamline the solar permitting process. You're spot on with that. Cities do have the control on that, and that also helps make solar more affordable. So there's a designation. We became a Sol Smart Gold certified city, actually, earlier this year because of the work over the last year we've been doing to train solar contractors, to train our permitting and inspection staff, and also the new EDIS electronic permitting system. How do we ensure that these contractors know how to properly use it so that it's quick and streamlined? And we have some ways in which we can improve it even further, but we are making considerable progress in that direction. So great point.
I appreciate the work y'all are doing. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Commissioner.
you very much, Chris.
Appreciate it.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Thank you, Mayor. There we go. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chris. You know, I'm a big fan of yours. As a matter of fact, I'm heading to Colombia to brag about you. We got this convention. Continuing Education Network of Latin America and Europe. So,
Wow.
and we're going to be talking about sustainability.
I'll
which
be
is the
helping
main
you out with the
subject.
resources if you need, right?
I need a copy of that presentation.
My
Anyhow,
pleasure.
hey, by the way, I like that comment you made about the 23, 25 degrees angle to
Yes.
get the perpendicular. That means that if we put a chair like that, we get a direct suntan. I mean, faster.
Correct.
Just kidding. One of the challenges we're having is the fact that our parks are wetland, and I have a big problem in La Costa wetlands. It's with vagrancy and pollution. Big time problem. And I was going to suggest to this council and the mayor to see how we can put some money aside for cameras to be able to identify these guys that go into our wetlands and parks, and to stop this nonsense, because we keep going to the parks, we keep cleaning our areas, and people have no respect. The other challenge we have is in our medians. We just beautified the median, a couple of years ago in Cimarron, and it's filthy full with cigarette butts and whatnot, and we need to do something about this. I don't know how to stop people. We have to develop a campaign, a marketing campaign, to create a conscience about this problem in so many ways.
We got to keep Orlando beautiful,
Exactly,
right?
we have to maintain Orlando beautiful. But it's a big problem, and it has to do, and I think our schools are doing a great job educating our kids and telling them about this. But we still have people who have no conscience. So we have to create that conscience.
Yes.
I visit South America a lot, try to bring businesses from over there. But in doing so, I've been to Medellin, Colombia, and I know we have a good friend of ours here that is always talking about Medellin. The first time I went over there, I was asking the taxi driver what kind of machinery they used to clean the streets, because it was so clean, so neat. And he's asking me, he said, "What are you talking about?" And I keep, because we have these big sweepers around here in Orlando, and they don't use sweepers. They just many years ago they created this campaign and created that social conscience about not littering. So why can't we do the same thing? And I think it's an effort where we all have to participate. You have done a beyond excellent work, you and your team and everybody, in bringing that sustainability conscience, and the
That's
effort
right.
has been astounding. And we don't get tired of talking about this, but we have to, I guess, push a little bit more the sense of maintaining our city beautiful. And I'm really concerned about our parks and wetlands in terms of the debris and the garbage and all these different things. You find mattresses, and
Yep.
I don't know how many
We've
times
been
we
out
go
there
to
together.
to the La Costa wetlands, and
Yeah.
and I have some other friends who have done that for us too, and Eric here, and we keep finding stuff. So how do we stop this nonsense? So I suggest that there's cameras that operate on solar power, and others that operate on lithium batteries, and they last up to 2 years or whatnot. Maybe we can come together, sit down and figure something to maintain, to be able to stop this nonsense. So.
One thing I just want to mention is that this is where the collaboration with our community groups and neighborhood associations really comes into play. I want to highlight Jody Bias at Keep Orlando Beautiful,
Yes.
and Jan Rahill
Awesome.
with Green Up Orlando, who are tremendous at getting out in the community and engaging our neighborhoods and beautifying the city and cleaning up some of our lakes and wetlands. And in addition, some of the community groups that are out there supporting the city in doing that. This is where we can't do it all, right? We don't have the resources, unfortunately, to have a huge team that's going out and cleaning up everything. This is why we empower community groups, neighborhood associations, nonprofits who are out there in the community and really helping to achieve our goals together. This is why it's a community sustainability action plan. It's something that was developed by the community, for the community, and gives signals to these community groups to say, hey, these are what's important to all of us. Help us achieve that. We can't do it alone as a city. Help us achieve that. And so I agree, we're going to continue to collaborate and make sure that we
By all
elevate
means,
that.
and I appreciate you mentioning Jody Bias, because she does an excellent job.
She
and all
does.
our groups that we have in the city, collaborators. But I think we still have, from our standpoint, maybe put a little bit of money aside to dedicate some funding to get some of this technology to help us
We'll look into that.
deter that.
We'll certainly look into that.
Okay, thank you so very much. Thank you,
Thank
Mayor.
you.
Commissioner Ings?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Chris. Enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Specifically in the 2018 Community Action Plan,
Mm-hmm.
on page topic, best practice case study.
Mm-hmm.
That's building neighborhood resiliency in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Familiar with that study that's in this book?
I am.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
So in New Orleans, of course, following Hurricane Katrina, they really realized that climate resilience was one of the biggest investments that their city could work on. And as a result, what they created was these neighborhood-scale resilient hubs, where they were empowering, almost like citizen watch groups. And in fact, many of them were crime watch groups who came together, but they mobilized hundreds of different communities to create these resilient hubs, to provide them resources. Some of the community groups got solar plus battery backup, so that in a time of an emergency or a hurricane, individuals in that community can come and charge their phones, and they can actually get access to power so that they can call their loved ones or call emergency. And in the plan, you'll notice that in addition to our strategies and our progress updates, we have some best practices in each focus area that we've identified from other cities that we'd like to start to incorporate or emulate in one way or another. And I mentioned the theme, climate resilience, being an important theme throughout the plan. We want to ensure that that's something that we start to work on. There's the Florida Resiliency organization that's now working in Central Florida to help us to develop these types of resilient hubs, and it's still very much in its infancy stages, but as it starts to develop, each one of us are going to need to be a part of helping to create these hubs so that in a time of an emergency we're better prepared, we can adapt to, and we can recover from some of these extreme weather events that we're definitely going to continue to see moving forward.
And the reason I mentioned this particular plan too is because locally we're having problems with neighborhood flooding and that sort of thing.
You got it.
A lot of rain,
Yep.
these past months and what have you, so our local roads have been flooded, even backyards.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just out Saturday at the Washington Park Cemetery,
Hmm.
and it was flooded throughout.
Really?
And I can understand how that really happened.
Well,
Like this, but when we talk about making and drilling down into our neighborhoods, making them resilient to flooding, and I think that's too part of the resiliency in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
Flooding not necessarily, just from the hurricane itself.
Yep. Just traditional rain events.
Traditional rain events and drilling down into our local neighborhoods.
Well, and really quickly underscoring a point in the water area, we say we want to pilot green infrastructure as a stormwater mitigation strategy. And green infrastructure is the use of essentially building out our roadways and some of our parks to basically filter out and slow the water as it goes into our stormwater systems. When we engineered these stormwater systems decades and decades ago, we didn't engineer them for the increase of rain intensity events that is now the new normal for Orlando. And it's going to continue to rise in intensity. And so what we need to do is ensure that as we're building new roads and as we're retrofitting new parks, that we incorporate green infrastructure, which is what New Orleans has been doing to mitigate the amount of flooding that's imposed on households and throughout the communities. We agree that that is one of the biggest climate vulnerabilities and risks that our city faces. And as we build over our wetlands, which happens to be the catchment and the solution to mitigate a lot of the flooding, as we start to do that and encroach, and we have over the many, many decades, we're starting to see that water has to go somewhere. And it tends to go often in throughout our neighborhoods. And so this is why it's so important for us to add additional protections for those important natural resources and retrofit these roads to incorporate green infrastructure.
So are you guys currently working on issues concerning that or plans concerning that to deal with those specific issues?
We do have a pilot in the plan and have been talking with Streets and Stormwater about how to incorporate green infrastructure as a pilot. And in fact, Orange County has been at the table as well to see how we collaborate on one in the downtown and then test how we operate it, how we maintain it, using the natural plants to mitigate the flooding, and then start to incorporate, hopefully, that moving forward as a standard strategy. So we're in the very early stages of it, but it is something that we do have a keen interest and certainly a strategy within the plan.
Okay, I'd like to plan a little trip so that we can go out into the community, because I do have some constituents that have contacted me, reference flooding in their backyards, on their streets, what can they do? And
Okay.
I have no earthly idea personally, but I do need some help from you, Public Works,
Yes.
to go out and take a look and see what we can do, and also maybe even talk with the citizens as well.
Okay.
So that they are aware of what we're trying to
Be happy to do
help
that.
them. One of the things that I was looking at too was, what are your plans to schedule further community workshops? You talked about 2 districts earlier, but drilling down into the other districts, and specifically for me, District 6, what are your plans to kind of drill down into District 6 from a community workshop perspective?
So the community workshops that I mentioned were part of the development of this plan, and it really wasn't district focused. It was more east side and west side of Orlando, and making sure that all constituents, no matter what district you're in, had the ability to come and engage. We do want to continue, as we develop now, start rolling out this plan for implementation, we want to work with each one of you all in your districts, at your neighborhood associations. Remember the spring into sustainability efforts we did with OUC. We want to continue to kick those off and go out to speak at your neighborhood meetings, to speak at your district meetings, so that we could enlighten our community about these strategies and continue to get more feedback. The strategies outlined in this plan are not the only things we're going to be working on over the next 3 to 5 years. There are many other things that continue to come up because of community interest, as you all are well aware, that we prioritize. And so these are just kind of the priorities that the community feels we need to work on to get to our 2040 goals, right? So they're the incremental strategies for the next 3 to 5 years, but they're not the end all be all. There may be other things, and there will be other things that come up and that we're gonna work on to achieve our goals. Certainly what we've done thus far in the last 4 to 5 years was never in the 2013 plan. Right, so we want to make sure that we continue. It's an iterative process, and we'll continue to get feedback and input and priorities from the community to work on as a city.
And one last thing on today's agenda, hearing ordinance and second read ordinance 2018-49, granting JJ Waste Recycling a non-exclusive franchise. Are you familiar with that company?
I'm not familiar with that company.
Okay. They are a new company that's come here in Orlando. They want to do some great things, especially as far as recycling waste, food waste.
Interesting.
And I think you would find it really interesting too. Daryl Corbett is the vice president of this organization, and I have his information that I could give you a little bit later on, so that you can certainly meet and talk with him. He may even be here this afternoon, I don't know, but
that's good.
As
Mayor,
you would really be amazed by this and what they have.
I'm excited to meet with them. As Mayor often says, the more roll-offs we have, it shows the economy is pretty strong when you have more of those ordinances that come forward. And so we are excited to continue to expand. Any business who wants to come here to help us achieve these goals, we're welcoming them. You know, the solar industry is one of those industries that we've seen accelerate. We've more than doubled the amount of solar companies just in the last 2 years in Orlando, because of the PACE program that we enabled, because of the focus on 100% renewables. Businesses, the 3 largest ones in the entire country, Vivint, Sunrun, and Tesla Solar City, have moved operations to our region. This is economic development. This is an opportunity to create jobs, and Orlando and the Central Florida region was by far the #1 installer of solar over the course of this last year, thanks to a lot of the cooperatives that are starting up, the solar co-ops throughout our communities, as well as now OUC's new programs for community solar and OUC collective solar. These are fantastic efforts that are bringing more businesses to our region.
Well, they have machines that can compost food, specifically from restaurants, and actually turn it into fertilizer and that kind of thing in a huge way.
We need more of that.
Yeah.
We need more of that.
I know you would be real interested in meeting Daryl and also Jason Russo.
Okay.
So I'll make sure you get their information.
Thank you, Commissioner. That's great.
Okay, thank you, Chris. A lot of good information in a short period of time.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you,
That'll
Commissioner.
conclude our workshop for today.